All right, welcome back to Cut and Splice. This is Jason, and once again, I'm here with Gil and Matt. We were hoping that we'd get a fourth person on this one, but unfortunately, things did not work out quite right. But tonight, we were going to be talking about the new Dune movies that Denis Villeneuve made, and obviously, that's going to entail also talking about how they stack up to the previous versions of this movie and the book.
I guess so. Yeah. Um,
Hopefully, it won't be too negative.
hopefully. Um, yeah. So I guess initially the reasoning for this was our friend Andrew, or at least Jason, thought that it would be interesting to speak to him because he was reading the book, right? And to
Well,
see
more
like,
specifically, because he had never read the book or
Mhm.
seen any other previous version of it. Um,
I see.
and I firmly believe that while the new version of Dune has many good things about it, um, it was one of the most disappointing experiences cinematically that I've had in a long time because Dune is one of my favorite books. And in short, I don't think that they did a very good job telling the story. And I would be, I'm hoping that I can convey my reasons for that and also explain that I'm not simply complaining as a fan of the book that they changed things, but more importantly, that they did, in fact, just do a poor job telling the story. And of course, I'll get into the reasons for that and explain it.
Yeah. No, that's definitely
Oh,
what
and
I'm
sorry
I'm
to
looking
to
forward
finish
to.
what you were saying. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the reason that we were hoping that we could get Andrew on this is because since he saw the movies and more or less liked them from what he told me, but had not really had any other experience with Dune other than that he had started the audiobook but really only got like a chapter or two in. I thought it would have been perfect to talk to him and be able to more or less ask him some basic questions because it is my theory that a lot of the people who love these new movies um, at least have a basic understanding of Dune and they're kind of filling in the blanks, filling in the gaps, if that makes sense. Because in essence, as I said before, I don't think they did a very good job telling the story. And I think that if you were to find someone who was more or less a layman going into it and watched the movies, I think that we could ask a series of very simple questions that you should be able to answer had you watched any other version um, or read the book, but certainly just watched the other versions. Not deep knowledge of the story or anything like that, just simple, basic questions that are important. And I think that we would find that people would not really be able to answer them very well. And so we were hoping that we would be able to do that. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, it didn't work out. And that's fine. We can still
No,
talk about it and get
no,
into
no.
it.
Yeah, I think we can still. Yeah, go ahead, man.
Just to interject, I mean, Jason, this is 2024. It's not layman anymore. It's lay person. You
Ooh,
awful
boy, I'm dating myself here,
watch
huh?
person.
What was that?
No,
Lay
I
person.
just
Oh, it's a whole
no.
like.
Obviously, I'm joking. But anyway, go.
But no, but actually, Matt, I was curious. We should definitely keep this review portion kind of on the short side because definitely be worth getting into the details very
Absolutely.
freely with spoilers. But like Matt, like what's been your overall reaction to the first one and the second one? You know, just
Real
as
quick,
movies. I
Matt,
wouldn't
before you
get
answer,
too yeah.
just want to say, in case I say this at some point in the next, for the rest of this thing, and it confuses anyone, um, just to clarify, Dune is one book, and it has several sequel books. But Denis Villeneuve's movies, Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, or whatever the heck they're actually called, Dune and Dune Part 2, or whatever he called them, they are just the telling of the first book, and he split them up for time purposes. So if I'm ever saying anything and I'm just referring to them as one story, it's because I don't even think they're two movies. It's really a lot like, Kill Bill 1 and 2. It's like it is one movie. It's just split up for time purposes.
Yeah, definitely. It's also Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. To some degree.
No. But like I mean, in a real, and I know what you're saying by that, Gil. But the reason I say that is because there may be times where I'm referring to, and I say like the second book. I'm not talking about the book portion of that they cover in Dune Part 2. Cover very poorly. I'm talking about what the book that would come after that, because Dune is one book.
The
And
Messiah.
Then Dune Messiah is the next book. Children of Dune is the book after that. So it's like, that's what all I'm trying to, that's all I wanted to clarify before Matt went on.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm viewing both of the videos in the same way, and that they're one long movie split up into two. My evaluation is that they're both photographed brilliantly. I mean, Greg Fraser is probably among the best cinematographers working in the world right now. The production design is immaculate. The acting across the board is pretty damn good. And still, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I mean, I think that Denis Villeneuve is one of the better directors working in the world right now, but especially with Part 2, I think that there were certain production decisions that were made that were like on the border of Zack Snyder bad. Like, they look great in the moment. They feel great in the moment, but they don't actually work logically at all. Also, in terms of world building, there are a lot of issues in terms of battle tactics. There are a lot of world building issues. So, I mean, I think that this is definitely on the better side of what I could expect from a Dune adaptation. I just think that if I were to evaluate, I think that Jason is right. That still with these two movies put together with like a culmination of what, 5 to 6 hours of screen time.
5 hours and 25 minutes, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you're still kind of expected to fill in the blanks yourself.
How long is the book, Jason?
1 second.
Like 1,000 pages or
I have it
something?
sitting right here next to me.
It's not 1,000.
No, it's not 1,000.
500, 600.
So not including the appendices, the book is about 500 pages, I think. Hold on, let me see.
Okay.
I'm in the appendices, so just shy of 500 pages. Now, of course, it's kind of stupid to measure these things in pages because just to be clear, I actually had a debate with somebody online about this, and then we both sheepishly realized that we were talking about a different edition of the book. Obviously, how it's printed on the pages can affect page count a little bit. I am talking about what edition is this? The 1990 printing. and it says that it's 492 pages or something like that. Anyway, yes, it's about that.
I see. Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's definitely warrants the two movies, but it should be shorter. Like I feel like a 500-page book should be like 2 2-hour movies, like one 4-hour movie, kind of like Lawrence of Arabia type of thing or something. But definitely there's a slow pacing in this, which is I think a trademark of Denis. But yeah, I didn't mind it too much, and I do because I think we've debated this part a lot, like about like the long movies and how to approach it. And I think this is the sweet spot. I still think that the part one is a bit too open ended, and it would have been
I'll get
nice.
into that.
And it would be nice if there was. I mean, they have the fight sequence at the end of the
And
first
they shouldn't.
ones. Which is, I think it was a device in order to have a climax to show that, like, okay, he's on the path. But it was still like left a bit empty. So that's why I rated like part 1 7, and part 2 I rated an 8. And I think that these ratings are actually not that high. Like, because for me 7 is average. So like meaning that Dune part 1 was just okay. Like it's probably worth watching if you like movies and you like sci-fi, but it's not anything outrageous, out of the ordinary. I mean, I give Edge of Tomorrow like an 8, or like The Dark Knight like a 9. Like Minority Report, I think I gave a 9, maybe an 8, but still more than 7. But yeah, and then Dune Part 2, just because it was just more satisfying because it brought the story to conclusion. There was more of the universe that was exposed, the whole sandworms and all that. It was just like the scope got bigger, which is the way I think it should be. But yeah, and it gave us an ending of sorts. That's the thing. That's my slight criticism of the second one too. There's also no ending, but that's I don't know. I guess you'll tell me if it's different in the book, but I know that pretty much that's roughly how the story goes. But we'll get into the details. But overall, I might agree with Matt to some degree that there's, like, Denis has a problem. He's very solid. Like he's a very solid craftsman. Like he just knows how to like stage scenes and shoot scenes and the design and all those things. He's got a just very like he's sort of like a Del Toro of like epicness, of sorts. Like what Del Toro is with like monster creations, like Denis is with just cinema scope. Like he just kind of like gets it. He gets the way to make movies big. But like say what Nolan might have, and even like Spielberg to some degree, that Denis doesn't have, is like this sense of humanity. Like he has it, but at times it feels a bit too disconnected, too I can't explain it. Like maybe as we talk about it, I'll be able to explain it better. But it's a bit too detached to some degree, which is something I generally tend to like Kubrick films and stuff like that. But I'm lacking. Like if you're gonna be detached, then you need to be intellectual, and I don't think his movies are intellectual enough to warrant the detachment. I think that's what I mean. So yeah, like he's hovering in between like detachment, lacking intellectualism, lacking emotion, but it all looks nice. It looks great, but it's just like he's not nailing those things, those specific things, and you can't put your finger on those things, but maybe we will as we discuss it. But that's my overall take. Like I'm glad he did this. It's not as bad as like the Transformers movies or any of these like adaptations of other beloved like franchises or the new Star Trek. It's not as bad as any of those things, but it's also not a home run. That would be my overall takeaway.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that you guys at least somewhat agree with me.
I mean, fundamentally, I would just say that, like, even if I completely remove the book from my brain, and that's not too hard because it's been like 20 years or something since I've actually read the book, just as a pair of movies, obviously designed to be two separate movies. Well, no, sorry, two movies designed to be one full story. There are a lot of problems here.
Oh, yeah.
And there are a lot of basic movie making issues that I had with it. And I mean, even visually, I mean, I have already said this movie looked great, but there are still like cinematography decisions that they made that bother me. That I don't think were good decisions. That just literally had me in the auditorium watching the sequence and scratching my head, and it's not because I have head lice, because I don't, and it's not because I have dandruff, even though I do. It was just, I don't understand why you're doing this. So yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, Denny, I mean, it's one of those things where you can look at certain Christopher Nolan movies like Tenet and say, this is the exemplar of his strengths doing everything that's great and everything that's awful about him. Like, he's so great at X, Y, and Z, but he's so bad at A, B, and C. And for Christopher Nolan, at least for me, Tenet was him being great at X, Y, and Z and being awful at A, B, and C. For me, Dune Part 2 was Denny Villeneuve basically being great at X, Y, and Z and being awful at A, B, and C.
Strangely,
I
that
don't
made
know.
a pretty good amount of sense.
Okay.
um, yeah, so maybe you should give your ratings and we can get into the spoilers and stuff.
Are we reading both of them together or just
I guess that's a
being
good
two?
point. That's actually a good point. So I guess I give it 7.5 if I average them out, which I feel like is appropriate.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I would come in at about a 7, but maybe a 6.5.
I would, if I were to rate them both, I'd say, I guess I'd put them at like a very beautiful 6. I think that if I had to rate them separately, I I didn't get super furious with the first one until a good ways in, like towards the end. The second one, I was so disappointed with what they did that it was hard. It just made it hard to even really appreciate the good things. So like obviously I'd put that one a little lower. So like maybe um a 7 and a 6, or a 6.5 and a 5.5, or something like that. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so I guess yeah, if there's nothing else that we can say as far as review, we get the spoilers.
Yeah, let's do it.
So one thing I was yeah, I guess you should start, Jason. But like the overall so what was the exactly like, for one thing, I guess we'll start with the end of part 1. So what was the reason that the fight between him and the Fremen
Jameis.
guy? Yeah, like why was that not appropriate to end it on? Or
It's
does
just
that
such
even
a
happen in
bad
the book?
spot. Of course it. Oh, it's one of the most important scenes in the book, but it's such
Yeah,
a
yeah.
bad spot to put it. It's so dumb. It's
Oh,
the
because it's
start
near
of
the end.
his journey to becoming. Or it's not really the start of in the book, but really, you could argue that these different parts of the story take place at different points. But I mean, really, the whole first part is all about the setup and introducing the characters and all stuff like that, and then the coup, the betrayal, the battle, the Baron's plan coming to fruition, and the attack, and then killing off all the House Atreides and stuff like that. All that stuff is the big ending of the first one, and it should end really with Paul and his mother Jessica like running off and escaping. Now, the first portion of the book, the book is broken up into like three portions, so you can kind of define the different moments. But I mean, realistically, I think this is just my opinion, but
You should have done the Peter Jackson thing, 3 movies.
yeah, the perfect thing to no, I don't think you should have done that. That's funny though. No, because the third section is very short. It actually makes sense to combine the last two parts into one. But yeah, like a little into the second portion of the story, um, is the scene that they depicted in this movie where uh, you've got Duncan, um, you know, or I mean, you've got Paul and his mother flying or escaping into the desert, and they have a scene where they're in the still tent, that little tent thing in the sand, and that scene is one of my favorite scenes in this movie. Actually, I think they did a very good job with it. Um, and he starts having a lot of visions. They know that his father is dead. They're both grieving and dealing with it, and it's a very important scene. Then following that, you've got like the thing where Duncan picks them up and takes them to Liette and Dr. Kynes. And that is something I was so excited about because they actually filmed that scene. And it's been done in the other two versions as well, the Lynch version and the sci-fi miniseries, to varying degrees of success. But I had really hoped that they would have filmed the whole thing. They got about the first half of the scene. And sadly, the second half is where all the meat is.
The first half of which scene was this?
Do you remember in the movie when Duncan takes them to this little weird like facility out in the desert, and there's some Fremen having a little meal out in the sand, and then they go into this little like library area in the back, and he taught Paul and his mom talk to Liette, and and Duncan is out in the hallway, and the bad guys come and he fights all of them. Remember that scene?
I think so. Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah,
towards the end. Yeah, it's very
towards the end. It's like with what's his face with Aquaman.
Jason Momoa. Yeah,
Jason Momoa.
Duncan Idaho was one of the most important
Duncan Idaho.
characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in the other versions, they completely. I love the fact that Denis Villeneuve put that scene in there because it's a beautiful death scene that they give Duncan, and that's more or less how it happens in the books, except that he's. I mean, they don't have a laser gun there, but that's okay. It's not a problem. He like fights off the Sardaukar, and there's the thing they don't capture in the story. I mean, they kind of do, but the thing is that there's a very important conversation happening in that scene. It's kind of, in my opinion, kind of the climax of the first part of the story, because that is the moment where Paul is really growing up. He realizes that to survive, he and his mom either need to get off planet or they need to ally themselves with the Fremen. And really, Liette is more or less their leader. He's kind of like their John the Baptist or something. It's a weird kind of like parallel thing, but he's the one who's kind of their leader, but they don't, it's not like there is no one leader of all the Fremen kind of thing, but they all kind of look to him, or in this case, her. Um, and um, he's trying to convince Liet to, to take them in or help them in some way. Liet knows that doing that could be suicidal and doesn't really want to. And the importance of that conversation is so vital that every second of it counts. And if he decides to just turn them into the Harkonnen, that's the end of the story, you know? And they kind of portray it as an important scene, but instead at the end they kind of just have like Duncan's there and the Sardaukar show up and he's fighting them and they close the door and they're like, no, sad, kind of thing. But what's really supposed to be happening there is he's buying them time to finish that conversation. He's dying in the process, and it's really tragic to read in that scene in the book. And nobody's really done it right. Denny did it the best, like, because the other ones didn't even try really. They really didn't do it a very good job of it in either of the other versions. They have a conversation, but they don't have that scene where it's like a martyr type of death for the cause kind of thing. And that's great. And it's what follows that scene is them getting into the Thopter and flying, and they're being chased by the bad guys, and they get into the sandstorm. To me, that's a good cliffhanger moment. You should end it right there. Just because the whole thing should be that he succeeded at least somewhat, not well enough, but he succeeded enough to that Liet decides that he or she wants to help them, and then spreads the word to the Fremen and says, hey, there's a good chance you might encounter these people, go find them. If you do, save the boy, so on and so forth. And they fly off into the sandstorm. They're being chased by the bad guys. And there's this moment of, are they going to die or not? That's where I would have personally ended it. You don't have to end it there, but that would have been a good spot. To me, everything that follows after that is like a perfect place to start, because the next part of the story is him learning how to survive as a Fremen, learning what the Fremen culture is like, learning what their society is like, who they are, meeting them, learning all these things. What better way could you start the second half of the story than with this cool fight where they encounter this tribe, and then they have to, when you start a movie, you want to introduce the important characters. Perfect way to do it right there. They meet 3 or 4 of the most important characters right there. You got Stilgar, you got Chani. Clearly we talked to Stilgar earlier, but he was a very small scene. Now we're really meeting like a Fremen tribe. Anyway, to me, it just was a really weird thing to tack on at the end of the movie. And I really don't want to get too deep into this, but that scene is so problematic and so infuriating to anyone who's seen any other version of Dune or or read the book or anything, because it is so stupid the way they handled it.
Which scene?
The scene with where Stilgar and all the Fremen meet them, and then he ends up fighting Jameis.
Oh, I see.
It's crazy how bad it is. Like, some of it's okay. Some of the dialogue's all right. They kind of condense the conversations into pretty much the meat of what you need. But what's supposed to happen in all the other versions and in the book is they meet. Stilgar is kind of like, we're probably going to kill the mom. We'll save the kid because this is the one that Liet told him about. So they're like, all right, well, let's do that. Then he gets down there. The mom does what she does with the martial arts, the weirding way. And he's like, whoa, oh my gosh. And he tells everyone, hey, back off. Don't kill her. Like, this woman's valuable, so on and so forth. And they talk for a while. Paul meets Chani. Paul, drops Jameis on his butt, and then, and runs up to the top of the mountain, whatever. All that stuff exactly as they played out, pretty close to the same. And then they get moving, and they walk all day, and they get to one of their little places, their little caves where they, do stuff, where they sleep, and where they on their trails and their travels. They get to a little safe haven place where they can rest, and they seal up the cave, because that's how they survive out in the desert, is they get into caves and they seal them up, and they can take their still suits off. They sleep, and the next morning they wake up when they're going to leave. That's when Jameis is like, okay, I'm going to kill this kid. Or he's actually, I think he's trying to kill the mom or something, but then he ends up fighting Paul. But the point is that these people live and die out in the desert. The only way they survive is at night. They travel at night. They do everything at night. They try to avoid being out in the sun if under all costs. At all costs, it's like you never want to be out in the sun. You want to preserve your water at all costs. And the vital thing that you need is a still suit. It makes no sense whatsoever for them to be fighting in their still suits in the day outside. It is beyond stupid. They would never do that. They strip down into like Speedos and they fight each other in the cave where they can collect all the water that they sweat off and stuff like that into the air and so on and so forth. Then they can, you know, process the dead bodies and stuff like that without having to carry them somewhere and leaking all out and everything. It's so ridiculous that they took so much care in some of the world building throughout the rest of that first half of the movie. They were so good about so many things. And this scene is beyond rushed. It's like they took like, I want to say probably like 10, 15 pages of the book and condensed it down into like 3 minutes. It's so stupid how they have them doing this. And then on top of all that, he kills him. They ruin his still suit, which is ridiculous. He dies. And then the movie is trying to portray Jameis as like this like, I don't know, force ghost, this thing that he keeps getting visions of for the rest of his life. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's an important moment in his life. He learned about killing. He learned about how important it is, you know, about how life and stuff like that. But it's not like Jameis meant anything to him as like a mentor or anything. It is so freaking weird how they decided to use him in visions for the rest of the next movie.
Yeah, no. Tell us how you really feel.
It's just that last scene is so bizarre. And then a little cherry on top. Talk about contradicting yourself. I really like how Denny did the scene with where they introduce Mapes. That's the housekeeper character. They almost get it perfect. It's really good. Actually, this is exactly how I would feel about most of his scenes, actually. Swing and a miss, because he really sets things up pretty well. Visually, everything is so good. The way that Jessica interacts with Mapes is so spot on and so good, and it really seems to kind of get the scene right. And then it's like they get all this stuff right about the knife, and she starts talking about the maker, and you see shout out Mapes like react in this like really strange emotional way that only makes sense when you understand what she's going through. And there's this whole thing about how it's just this really important moment that both of them are connecting as people who understand the Fremen. And she pulls out the Chris knife, and in the book and stuff like that, the whole concept is you don't ever sheath the knife without putting a little bit of blood on the blade. It's just a weird thing. You could get into it later, but it's not important. The point is, it's an important part of the story, and they don't do that in that scene. And I know that saying that like it's a problem, it sounds like I'm just like a book nerd and I'm like picking at a little tiny thing. You know, it's very important to the book. It's very important to the story, but like that's not what drives me crazy. What's crazy is that in the same movie, not just the second half, but at the end of the movie, you have all the Fremen actually doing that. Like he makes a point to show all of them like doing that dogmatically, and so they knew what they were doing. I don't understand why they don't have that in that scene. It's mind blowing. It's like it's almost on par of like some of the really stupid mistakes that they made with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. It's like, you know that there's like tons of people who could help you and tell you what's wrong with this scene. You know, it's like, and they knew they put it in their own movie, and yet it contradicts itself. It's just weird.
I don't know. I'm still confused about what was the contradiction exactly. So it was like something earlier in the movie that later on was contradicted by the rest of the Fremen.
Basically, every time they pull out a Chris knife and take it out of the sheath, they're supposed to cut themselves or kill somebody.
Oh,
with it.
cut
You're supposed to
themselves.
put blood on the blade, and they do that in the scene at the end properly.
At
You
the
see
end.
every single one of them pull their knife out, then they nick it. They nick their hand or something or a little part of them,
Yeah, I think I recall
and they
that
put it
part.
back in. It's supposed to keep the blade from deteriorating. It's something they do religiously,
I see.
and they got it. Everyone who read the book and saw that scene was like, "Oh, look, they did that." And then earlier in the movie, in that scene, there's actually a really important part of that scene. It's supposed to be at the end of it. The girl's about to put the blade away, and the other woman says, "Hey, don't do that. You know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put a little bit of blood on that thing." And then that was like the straw that broke the camel's back for her when she was like, "Oh my God, she knows everything about our people," and she does it before she puts the thing away. Like it's the ending of that scene, and it's kind of like the last moment that makes that scene work so well. And they left it out. And it's like, it's not like you left it out because you wanted to make a change. You'd put it later in the movie. So it's like, why?
Well, it sounds like they just wanted to abbreviate the scene more than anything. Like maybe
It's a
they
really
just
important
didn't.
part of the scene. I don't know.
It seems like to you. I mean, it seems like that's a detail that I would watch the movie 50 times and I would miss. Like it's just like such a small
it's a detail
detail.
you'd miss if you didn't read the book.
I listened to the audiobook. I watched the miniseries. I watched David Lynch movie. I had no idea about that. Like
let me put it this way.
it's there.
It would
It's
not
there.
bother
The
me.
fact that it's there, I give them props for the fact that it's there. If I had directed this movie,
No.
I probably would have left it all together out because
You're
like
misunderstanding me. You're misunderstanding me. If someone were to make a Dune movie and they left it out, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care.
Yeah, because it's like a stupid detail.
It's
like
not a stupid thing. It does have purpose.
I guess it's like the
Listen,
world building of the book, but it's
listen.
to be honest, the book is kind of shitty. Like I think it's overcomplicated, but that's my opinion of the book.
That's
but I get it that like it's I just think that he really overcomplicated, which is why also the book was misread when it came out. Which Denis said is what he was trying to fix when he was making this movie. Like when the book came out, people misunderstood it and thought that like Paul was the hero when he's supposed to be an anti-hero. That's why he wrote the second book. Yeah, that's what the second book was supposed to be a correction for it.
It's not really a correction. It's just clarification.
Clarification. Yeah. So point is, like, I think that Frank Herbert just like wrote an overcomplicated story for its own good. That Denis tried to keep still complicated, but probably should have simplified it even more, in my opinion. Because to get stuck on that.
Yeah, let me just clarify. Okay, I don't care if they had put it in or not. The point is, the point in the moment in the book where they most explain it and make the biggest deal out of it is in the scene at the beginning of the movie when she meets that character. Okay. If you want to leave it out of the whole story, that's fine. But then they put it at the end, which clearly shows that they were making a point that this is a thing. They even talk about it. She says it to him. Chani says something to him about it. They show you that, yes, this guy wanted to put this in this movie and then left it out of the most important scene where you're supposed to talk about it. And the fact that it didn't happen in that scene contradicts the fact that they talk about it as this thing that they always do. Anyway, we're getting too deep into the weeds here.
Yeah, exactly. But listen, I think you make a good point about that specifically. I don't know if it was in the edit or what it was that made them leave it out the first time. Yeah. But overall, my impression of like obviously books have to be simplified,
of course,
in order to be made into a movie. Like for one thing, I would say about the point of stopping. It could have probably worked if they stopped it when Idaho, what's his name, like Duncan Idaho, when he saved them, like when he gave them a chance to escape, like it might have been a good spot for it to end. But then I think there might have been a bit more story to be told in the second half, and it would have made the second movie like over 3 hours, unless they cut more stuff in the second half, which is, that's also an option. Like I'm sort of okay with. I understand why his rationale was like that. Paul, like the hero or anti-hero, needs to have a big moment of proving himself, like some sort of like That's just my
Don't you think him like figuring out how to survive the storm would have been just fine?
uh potentially yes, but I think like him having uh, I think it would have worked either way. I just think that like the rationale was that like that for one thing he wanted to introduce Chani because of course, even though she's in the flashbacks, like because of uh Zendaya, like because she's popular. Like
Bad reason, but okay.
yeah, but I think it's a combination of that. It's a combination of trying to cover more of the book in that first part, and to like let Paul have the last big climactic action in the movie. I still am not crazy about it because ideally, like at least these two movies should have been like Lord of the Rings, at least like 1 year apart. Should be shot at the same time, or 6 months apart. So it's actually like
Agreed.
so you don't have to like be left hanging for that long. But yeah, but that's I think those are like that's one thing. But but overall, I completely understand. I mean, over like let's just take the or maybe Matt like actually Matt, can you because because Jason wanted to do this with uh with Andrew. Can you like give a synopsis of your understanding of the story of Dune based on watching the two movies? Because I'm curious to see if like it was my understanding was correct. I mean, broad strokes. Like it doesn't have to be like
Please.
an
Yeah.
outline.
The spice is basically a it basically stands in for oil. Arrakis basically stands in for the Middle East.
For Iraq.
Sorry. Timothy Chalamet is a skinny white boy who goes to what is standing in for the Middle East from
Well,
a
he's
rich
kind of like Lawrence.
Well, obviously.
for a rich nation to get the oil, and he ends up siding with the people with the Fremen who are the locals who who are connected to the land.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah,
but beyond
so
that, like
so
the political intrigue of like the emperor and the Harkonnens and all that. Like, did you
I
understand what was the sequence of the?
honestly this and this is coming with a lot of modern conflicts, but I mean, I was seeing a lot of bullshit politics in regard of the Harkonnens basically being the Israelis and the Fremen being the Muslims. But uh,
Well, I mean, I'm not even getting into like metaphors or anything like that. I mean, I know the Fremens are supposed to be like Arabs, like Muslims, but
right.
yeah, and there's like a whole white savior thing, like Lawrence of Arabia type of thing. And if anything, I would say that the United Kingdom, when it was an empire, was the was it no, or was it who was fighting the Arabs? I'm trying to remember if it was who was the enemy there. But in any case, yeah, like it's the fact that like the Western culture, I think, yeah, coming in, and some of them are worse than others, or and some of them are better than others. Like some of them are white savior type of like, but they still like use and abuse to some degree. Like they'll come in saying that, but I honestly wasn't even talking about the metaphors. But maybe I'll say like my thoughts, and both of you can tell me like,
Please.
especially Jason. But overall, because I will say, and maybe it's because I have a bad memory, and I feel like this is the first iteration of this story that I actually got the broad strokes. But I'm sure I might have gotten it also from the other ones, especially like the miniseries. But but generally it seems like that that the emperor had some sort of plan, because the Harkonnens gained too much power by their control over the planet of the spice. The emperor was trying to get them out of power, but also pit them against House of Atreides, because he was afraid that either or like of those would try to take over the throne or whatever. And so he was kind of setting them up to have conflict between each other, which I think also is like a Lawrence of Arabia. Got a little bit of a taste to it. And then of course what happens is that Paul, and generally like the House Atreides, they're more humanistic. They have like a more holistic approach. They try to make a connection with the people. They're not aggressive about it. They try to create cooperation. And Paul takes that to the next level, and he becomes one of them. And by doing that and stopping the Harkonnens from invading and all that, he becomes the next up to the throne. Like he becomes the next emperor. But it's like, bittersweet, especially here because Denis said that he used the character of Chani specifically, which is a bit of it has like a teenage vibe to it. The whole like relationship between them felt like a teenage movie a bit. Like when she stands in the end and everybody else like kneels, it's like the whole thing is like, yes, it's the fact that she doesn't believe in him to be the Messiah and all that, and she sees through his bullshit. But it's also the fact that like, hey, like we had like a love story going on, so I'm not gonna kneel to like the interest of my love. So I was a bit like mixed feeling about that part of it, but I think it made its point. I don't think it was strong enough. I think Paul needed to have more negative qualities to hint at the issue of like the hunger that he starts to develop slowly but surely to being the Messiah. Like he becomes very humble and he doesn't think he is that or doesn't want to be that, but I feel like he flips way too easily and you don't see the dark side. Not that it was done well with Anakin with the prequels, but the same journey that Anakin had is what's supposed to happen here, and I think both didn't pull it off 100%. But the most interesting thing, and I don't know if that's talked about enough, but also the fact that the Bene Gesserit are essentially masterminding this whole thing, like that behind the scenes, they're the ones which I like that aspect. That's probably like the best part of the whole story, is that the whole concept of like all these men's and their guns and their ships and their knives and their religion and their bullshit. Meanwhile, all the women are like just like pulling the strings from in the background, which is true in real life too to some degree. Like behind every strong man, there's a strong woman type of thing. So it is that part of the story I really enjoyed. What?
It's the Lysistrata narrative.
Yeah, but only here it's got an element of like I don't know, supernatural to it or something. But yeah, like it's and that's also I think like it lacked some focus on that too, because I think like the Bene Gesserit thing is pretty important. That they are like to some degree also like the evil, like it is funny that that on the surface it seems like the Harkonnens are the bad guys because they're all black, they're weird, they're shaven, but when you think about it, the Bene Gesserits are probably even more dangerous than the Harkonnens. If nothing else, they enable them to some degree, probably along the line at some point in the timeline. Like they're the ones that probably put them on the path to this, and they probably wanted to correct that, but just like any cabal that's behind the scenes working to try and like veer society, it's very tough to control every twist and turn. So I mean that's my overall take of the universe. I don't know if you feel, Jason, that's like a fair assessment.
extremely glad that I wish we had started with this. This would have been such a better place to start from. Because this everything you just said perfectly tees up the problems with this movie. So in broad strokes, obviously, yeah, you've got like the concept of the story more or less right, but there's some really important things that are wrong. And I'm not saying wrong for this movie. I'm saying like basically that they got wrong in the movie. And what you've said is more or less what I would expect someone to get based on the telling of this story, based on this movie. So I'll explain, but let me ask you some basic questions because this will really help. Based on this movie, Gil, what do you think the Fremen, like, why is it important that Paul even joined them at all? Like, what do they need from him? What does he bring to the table at all?
Oh, to the Fremen?
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously like an ally. I mean, because the Fremen are always
What's
dealing.
What's he bringing to the table, though?
What is he bringing to the table?
I mean, look at the first movie. Look at the second movie. What changes? Like, why couldn't they do what? Why couldn't they achieve what he achieved without him?
Oh, you mean fighting off the
everything that happens in the story? Why is he important?
No, but I mean, obviously, by the end of it, if he becomes,
I mean, you tell me. I mean, I want to know because I mean, I think this movie doesn't cover it.
Well, as far as like I can tell, the Fremen lack power. They lack they lack the technology. Like they don't even seek it. They want to be.
Did you see the opening scene when the Fremen are launching guerrilla raids and destroying harvesters and like kicking the crap out of the Harkonnen?
Yeah, no. Their deal is basically these people are invaders, and we want to make it as difficult as possible for them to do this, to the point of like that they'll eventually leave. It is kind of like the Middle East thing with the Palestinians and whatnot. Like, and other cases where like, Western culture invaded like say the Middle East and like Afghanistan and Russia, stuff like that. It's like, it's what's it called? Like a war of attrition,
Right.
That eventually like it's not worth the trouble. But unfortunately, spice is so valuable that.
What do you think he brings to the table, though?
The outside world, like he brings to the table, like he's part of a family that's in line to the throne potentially. And that's a whole other like that's a good ally to have. That's an ally that if he's on your side, you can become partners as opposed to adversaries. So obviously that's but that's not what they're seeking. Again, they're not seeking that. Like the only connection that they have to him is that they have this notion of a Messiah that's going to come and going to bring balance to the Force. Like that. That's and they think that he is him, and when he becomes emperor, which I haven't gotten into the other books or anything to know where it goes, like that they feel like that might be, or at least that's what their faith is telling them is the path that should be laid for them.
Let me I'll just clarify what I'm getting at here. In the book and every other version of the story, just to be clear, Dune was written a little bit after Lawrence of Arabia came out. It is not a retelling of Lawrence of Arabia, but it is definitely the plot and some of the story points are obviously influenced by Lawrence of Arabia. The points that it's making are very different, obviously. But just like in Lawrence of Arabia, the Fremen are supposed to be ferocious fighters that live out in the desert in a very primitive way. Now they do have they have knives and they have some stolen weapons like mala pistols and things like that. But more or less, they are capable of attacking some Harkonnen and making it hard for them to do what they do. But that is about all they can achieve. They're not unstoppable warriors. They're not incredible, amazing fighters. Except for in this version. In this version, the Fremen are so incredible that when Duncan Idaho goes out to meet with them, he comes back and reports that one of them was sent to kill him, and he fought him to the death and killed him, but it was the closest he had ever come to death. That is absurd, because Duncan Idaho at that point in the story would kill any one of their people, except for maybe the very, very best of them. When Duncan went out to see them in the book, they admired him. They thought he was a great fighter. He was incredible to them. And what I'm getting at here is they had these little guerrilla raids that they would do, but I mean, they were only effective enough to make it hard for the Harkonnen to do anything. Just like in Lawrence of Arabia, the difference is that when Paul joins them, he has been trained and for his entire life by some of the greatest tacticians in the in the galaxy. Twofer, his mentor, his guy, teacher guy, is supposed to be an amazing assassin and like general, and Duncan is amazing as well, and so is Gurney. These guys taught him how to, and his father, they all taught him incredible things, not just how to fight hand to hand, but how to be a leader. And just like in Lawrence of Arabia, it's this tactician who joins them and starts showing them, hey, look, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this. He starts teaching them how to better attack the Harkonnen and makes them far more capable than they ever were before. And then in the book and in all the other versions, the most important thing that they do is that the mom, Jessica, and Paul then start teaching them their fighting tactics. Now, before, the Fremen are supposed to be capable fighters. They're supposed to be like ferocious feral animals with a knife, and they will fight he says in the thing, they fight like demons, or whatever. But they're not skilled fighters. They're just very strong, deadly fighters. They're not, they're not going to like do all that well against a trained soldier one-on-one. Well, maybe one-on-one, but it's when he starts teaching the best of them the ways that they fight, and then he starts sending the ones that he's taught to back out to the sieges to teach others, and he creates an army of incredible fighters. That's what they completely got wrong in the story, because when you watch Denny's version, they almost don't need him. At the beginning of the story, they're already having these really successful raids with high-tech equipment. They're using awesome guerrilla tactics and tearing the crap out of the Harkonnen. And then he joins them, and it doesn't really seem like he's really leading them at all until the very end. He's really learning from them more than anything else, and which he is supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be learning to be a Fremen, but he doesn't teach them anything. Like there's almost nothing in Denny's version that really gives any meaning to what Paul brings to the table, except for, as you said, like a royal family type of thing that will be legitimate to outside worlds. But
Yeah,
moving on.
But it seems like that that when he gets involved, that there's some sort of like legend growing about.
Of course, we could get to that later too.
And which it seems like, if nothing else, he infuses, and that's something that they might have done, like they essentially fused Paul with what Duncan, I guess you said, does in the book. Like Paul just does it like at a later point, where like his presence combined with their like beliefs creates this like perfect storm that like makes them even stronger. But I think in the movie it actually shows that they have that belief about the Messiah, but yes, they're doing perfectly fine. They fight off exactly. Like these,
and
they're doing okay. That's why I said they don't seek it. That like really what it is that like once they see him and they start thinking that he's the Messiah, then they follow this path that they think was
that's
for him and for them. And yeah,
I don't really have a problem with that part. The part I do have is their whole splitting the Fremen into like secular Fremen and like fanatic Fremen, which is really stupid. But
I mean, that's if it's not in the book, that's okay. But I think that's actually But that's, I think, essential to some degree, because for
Absolutely
one
not.
thing, you show that they're not a monolith. If there's different regions, I hate this. I hate this when, like in science fiction, where all of a sudden everybody's unified and everybody's a monolith on a planet. Like it's so if there's
Okay,
like
let,
some
let
in
me
the south,
clarify.
some in the north, they might have different cultures. Like they'll be
Let me
similar.
clarify. Gil. There is a distinction that they completely left out in Denny's version. There's the city dwelling native Iraqans, and then there's the Fremen. If you live out in the desert, you're living such a hard life. Really, religion is one of the only things that gets you gets you through the day. Every one of the Fremen are fanatics. They came from a descendants of thousands of years of inbreeding. They are, and I don't mean inbreeding the way that creates like like mental retardation or anything like that. I'm just mean like they're a homogenous group of, when it comes to their society, their beliefs, and their ethnicity and things like that. They've been living out in the desert for a long, long time. Now they do have other people in the cities that are a lot more secular, and they can be friendly with them. They intermingle with them. They take wives, from each other, so on and so forth. They interbreed and everything like that. And more or less, that's where they would be getting some of that from. But the fact that they did it with the Fremen, and they completely removed any scenes at all that take place in the city, which is actually kind of an important part of the story, is really stupid. But let me ask you another question though. Gil, what do you feel based on this movie? What is the Spacing Guild? What is its purpose?
The what? The Spacing Guild?
Guild, yeah.
I don't. The guild? You mean like the different families and stuff, or?
See, yeah. I mean, that's like one of the single most important things of this entire story, and this movie does not cover it at all. They barely even mention them. It's crazy.
I don't know. So what's their purpose in the book?
I'll go into that. What is based on this movie? What is spice?
How long is this episode gonna be?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to go as fast as I can. I'm sorry.
No, but like I mean, the spice is necessary for like the whatever, like it's like space fuel, right? Like interstellar travel or something.
Absolutely not.
So what is it for?
Okay, so I mean, it is necessary for interstellar travel, but it's not fuel. All right, so lightning round. I'm just going to go down this list. Okay, this movie does not explain why the Fremen need Paul at all. It doesn't explain what the Spacing Guild is, why it's important, why it's vital to the entire story. It doesn't explain what spice does. It doesn't explain where it comes from, why it's there, why it's important to not just one thing, not just interstellar travel, but many aspects of society. It doesn't explain what the Kwisatz Haderach is. It doesn't explain what the Bene Gesserit are actually trying to do. It doesn't, like, oh my gosh.
It explains what the Bene Gesserit is trying to do, but I will say the Kwisatz Haderach. Well, what do you mean? Like they're trying to like keep balance in this society, but they it doesn't always work out. Like they say, they have different like threads. Like, right, like if Paul wasn't gonna work out, they have Elvis, like what's his face?
Well done.
Yeah.
Fade. Yeah, that's better than I thought that you'd say based on this movie, but that's good. Okay.
Yeah, no, because they have different like threads. Like if one guy, like they always have like the next up in line in one of these like major families that could become the next emperor. That they are able to control, but that the whole story here is that like they might have like underestimated Paul's like how much they can control him, or maybe not. I don't know, but I think that's like the story that I get from it. I don't know if the guild matters that much, and yeah, I mean the spice. I saw the part one. I saw part one recently, and there is like a voiceover there explaining what the spice is. Obviously, it's a 5-hour movie, so by the end of the 5 hours, like I don't remember what it is exactly. That's why it's like overly complicated. I know that it has to do with space travel. That's all that matters. Like it's essential for space.
All that matters.
No, but
and
it's very important.
That you're saying that proves my
because
point.
For an intergalactic society, space travel would be important. If
it's extremely important, and it is one of the most important aspects of it. But the fact that after watching these movies fairly recently, that's what you're saying proves my point. They did not explain any of this stuff, and this stuff is basic information that you get from the other versions of this story.
No, I think the spice thing is in the narration. It's in the beginning. It's just that it's mentioned once. They don't harp on it throughout the whole movie. It's not
supposed to be harped on. It's supposed to be an intricate part of the story.
Yeah, but the story is too long. It's too complicated of a story. So they're focusing on like the spice is important. Okay, now moving on. Like it's essential. This society, this intergalactic society, is not gonna give it up, and the Fremen are like you said, they're fanatics, they're demons. They call them demons. That's like fanatic. They're just very tough to get rid of, because they live in the desert and all that. Like I think all those things were set up.
I didn't have a problem with that part
really well. Like I think the distinction between secular and non-secular helps, because it makes sense that some of them might not have the same beliefs, which would show what the flaw in Paul becoming this Messiah figure is. Which seems like it wasn't as clear in the book as it was trying to make it in the movie. Like I said, the movie still is imperfect because I think Paul is a bit too flawless in his character for the most part, and he needed to have more flaws throughout at least part 2 to show his deterioration or like maybe hunger for power.
The fact that you think that is because of the way they ended the movie wrong.
No, because if him becoming this Messiah figure and the Emperor is actually a net negative for this intergalactic society, which is what apparently the purpose of Frank, because basically the point of the book, like Frank Herbert said, is don't follow anybody, follow yourself. Like don't, like messiahs are a bad idea, like in any form, like in society. Like you want to be skeptical of any sort of like anybody that comes and say like I know the way, because that person is selling something. That's the point of the book. That's why he wrote it.
Which is why the story is supposed to be not the way it portrayed in his movie. What it's supposed to show you is a story of Leto, the father guy, being a character who is kind of unrealistically good. Like he's almost too perfect as a leader. He's great. He's great in almost every way you could possibly imagine a guy being who's in charge of an entire planet. He's really better than the human race deserves as a leader. And then they go a step further. They go, you know what? We're not going to use him. We're going to use his son. His son is not only someone who was raised by him and raised by a mother with like superpowers and raised by the greatest like people ever who could like turn out the greatest leader there could ever be. We're going to give you an example of the greatest guy you could possibly want to be a leader. And even this guy, we're going to take you on a journey of how he doesn't even really want to be a godhead. He doesn't want these things. And even he gets trapped into this problem where he can't help what comes next. Even the greatest possible leader that you could possibly have, someone so much better than we could ever hope for in life, ends up causing a genocide. And not because he wanted to, not because he turned evil as the way you're talking about it, not because he had this downfall. He is the best we could hope for. And then on top of that, he even has superpowers after he becomes something even more powerful than the Kwisatz Haderach. And yet he still lets us down. That's the point.
Yeah. I think generally the point is that it's not a good thing for one person to have too much power. Basically, that's like why the founders like had the whole like checks and balances in government and whatnot. But yeah, like it's the fact that like you need to have a coalition of people making decisions, which ironically is what the Bene Gesserit do, but it's just behind people's back, not like to their faces. But and even there's like a hierarchy. So yeah, I mean, like it basically says that hierarchies are problematic. And it's a good point that the Fremen actually have like very little hierarchy. They're actually the
They
most
absolutely
democratic.
have a hierarchy.
But not they're more democratic than I would
No,
say
they're not. They
houses.
kill it. They fight each other to the death to determine who's in command.
Yeah. But they're basically equal while they're surviving and fighting off invaders. They don't have a head of a house who's like the ruler of the planet. Like it's not. They don't have a king.
They have a
or-
leader of every siege, every community of a
yeah,
couple thousand people have an
but they come
absolute
off
leader.
as more democratic.
Because Denny's trying to pervert this story.
Which I think works well because it actually makes the point that they got a good recipe, and everybody should follow them as opposed to them following Paul. But not to say that they're perfect. Obviously, they still have like odd rituals and honor culture, and that's problematic to some degree. But they have the right idea. The fact that like living off the land, appreciating the land, honoring the land, honoring the sandworms, like whatever. Like I think that's the whole tug and pull of like the ancient world versus the modern world is that the fact that the modern world has a lot it can learn from the ancient world, but the ancient world still needs to mature. Like it can't stay the way that it is, which is kind of like what is happening with the Middle East right now. It's like even to this day, like there's this tug and pull. Like the Middle East just wants to kind of stay in the Middle Ages, or at least it's pulling back to there. And we're trying to tell them like, no, it's okay. You can keep your beliefs and your ways, but you gotta like take a few steps forward to modernity, because we have this culture clash that's just like it's not gonna work. Like it's not good for you either. Like you're killing yourself in large numbers regardless of our intervention, because of like the culture that you're stuck in. And if we found some sort of like a happy medium, it'll probably be better for everybody. But I think that's like what I get from this story. But again, maybe the book doesn't go for that idea. I mean, I thought if he's anti-Messiah, it would be pro-democracy, pro like, spread the power, or at least like
I've never
decentralize
spoken
it.
to.
I'll be
Obviously,
very
I never had a
libertarian
chance
of him.
to Frank Herbert when he was alive, but my
I'm
understanding,
never excited about anything here. But
my understanding is that he felt like making this story based on what he saw as like a Messiah like worship of JFK, and he wanted to tell people, don't be sucked into this, this thing. It doesn't matter how good somebody actually is, they're still going to let you down. And it's dangerous to have a Messiah like, worship of somebody, because nobody is that good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I feel like Obama was another figure in recent decades that like was very similar. Like, yeah, he had that like when he came in, he had this very strong like effect on people, that
Certainly a strong following for sure.
and a strong following, and there's a lot of people. He's still very, very well beloved, and I think he was a decent president. I don't think he's as horrible as the right makes him to be, but he was actually he kind of like he ruled pretty centrist for the most part. But
I don't know if that's accurate, especially for his second term, but let's not get into that.
yeah. But in any case, point is that like there was a lot of disillusionment, disillusionment, like what's the word? With like with especially even with black people too, so certain black people. Like for one thing, like you can never please everybody. The woke people, or like the BLM people, like were upset whenever he would say something like along the lines of like, black people should be more responsible for their own actions, or things like that, like the things that would come more from the right. And then on the other hand, when he would say something that's like more towards that side, then everybody on the right would like lose their shit. So like nobody's happy. There was like that incident where he went to like it was from where Michael Moore's from, Flint, Michigan, where they had the issue with the water, the brown water. And I saw this documentary about it, and like he drank the water, like trying to say like there's nothing wrong with the water. Well, when people were telling him that like the water is not drinkable, they're drinking water bottles, there's a problem with the piping, and it's like the black president came to like one of the blackest cities in America and essentially told them fuck you. And it was just like it's like a really bad moment for him. But you know, so it's I think leadership is just difficult. And yes, there should never be like the way it is with Trump now. Like that's why I like Biden. That's why I actually like would gladly vote for Biden. Like you want to have a president that's boring and not likable. Like that's who you want. You don't want a Messiah. You don't want a Trump. Like you don't want to have someone who's extremely popular. That's why even like
I
the way
definitely don't want either one of them.
yeah, like I think it's a good thing to be bored with politics. Like you want to have like bureaucrats doing their work, and they should be boring. They should not be exciting,
Find Biden boring.
like a JFK or whatever, because
I,
like we said, power like
I,
has its problems. Like
I just don't agree with your conclusion.
what?
Yeah, I want a president who's boring like Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah,
I don't
please.
want somebody. I don't want a president who's boring like Joe Biden, who makes really dumb statements every week and
which
is
is
going
bad
to
policy.
try to put them into law and put people into prison over his dumb statements. Like
Yeah. I mean, the specifics. Obviously, he's way too old, and I wish that we like had someone else. But the country is just fucked up, and that's the voters' fault for basically rejecting most reasonable people when they're like are offered them in primaries, because they go for like these extremes. Like either I'm gonna vote for the guy who was, you know, the guy who was vice president under the Black Messiah, or like or nobody else, or it's gonna be Trump. So it's like that. This is what you ask for. This is what you got. Hopefully, once these two idiots are out of the way, we can finally allow the next generation to step up and see what they have to offer. But like, it's the voters' fault for basically like creating this conundrum. But I think it's the right is more at fault here than the left, because the right like is the one that elevated Trump the way they did, and essentially destroyed their own party. But but again, this is like, I think it's slightly apropos for this story is because Trump is like purely popularism. That's what popularism, like populism, is generally a dangerous thing, because it is a Messiah-like thing, and oftentimes in lesser countries they become dictators. Hopefully it won't happen here, but that's often how that happens, which is why it's a cautionary tale.
disinformation governance board, and literally put people out. But fuck it. We're not even talking about movies anymore.
No,
Okay.
I think it's somewhat like, to some degree, I think it matters here, because again, it's not about the politics, it's about the cult of personality thing. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
all right. You and Jason, Jason and you, sorry, have been going back and forth.
I was waiting for you to jump in.
Yeah. I did want to hear, like, before we close, the parts that bothered you about the world building.
First of all, can either of you explain why there's one scene and then a few shots on the Harkonnen homeworld that were shot in black and white?
Do you want like an in-world answer, or do you want like a movie?
I just want any aesthetic answer. Like, I'm going into this movie. I haven't read the books. I haven't seen the previous movies. I'm just coming into this. blind. My only experience with Dune are these two movies. Why is this black and white?
I would answer saying that there is no reason for it. It's just he liked the color.
Well,
Yeah.
I honestly I didn't notice that it was black. I didn't notice it was black and white. I thought it was a production design choice that they eliminated all colors from the set and from from people. I didn't know it was shot black and white. It just looked like a design of the world.
Well, I mean, it was shot digitally, so
Did they desaturate the
realistically,
image there? Like, did you read up on that?
right, right, they probably took the color out in post.
Yeah, but
So
I
it
wonder if like
was probably
100%. I'm not sure. I guess there's like skin tone because I know they also have like white makeup on the Harkonnen. So
no. I mean, there was actually an article that came out before the movie that I recused myself from to end the sentence with a preposition, and still haven't read because I wanted to have this conversation. But I mean, there is actually an article out there of like, oh, this is why the movie makers decided to portray the Harkonnen planet as black and white. And I decided to not read the article because I kind of figured that's a red flag immediately. Like, I mean, if there's a major decision in your movie and you have to write articles about why
Yeah. So
you
let me read this to
you
you, and you tell me what you think. Um,
uh,
according to NAB Amplify, Fraser shot the Gady Prime scenes on an Alexa LF modified so that it could only see infrared and not any visible light. Since the sun emitting infrared, creating light on it felt like a suitable creative solution to depict the life-sucking environment destroying Harkonnen. I mean, that sounds to me like
so it was like
since
infrared.
none of that is explained in the story, I would say that it's just an aesthetic choice that they felt looked nice.
Yeah, they wanted to look
okay.
different.
I mean,
I mean,
I'll be honest. I don't think it looked that bad. I just think it's a little weird.
no, I think it looked great.
Yeah,
I think it looked great. I just didn't think that it fitted with what they were doing.
that's
I
more or
mean,
less how I feel too. I mean,
I don't know.
I
I mean, again, it's weird that like because we're not that far apart about our opinion of the movie, but those things like would be the last things that would bother me because that's like just world building in a movie. Different planets would have a different look. It's like in Traffic, where like the Mexico side was all orange and the other side was more blue. It's a color palette choice.
right, but they had already established a look for the Harkonnen planet, which
Oh,
was just
was it in part one? Like, and it looked different.
even in part two, they had images on the Harkonnen planet which were just kind of like desaturated color.
weren't those interiors though?
Like high contrast. Yeah, right. But and then suddenly they go outside and it's black and white.
Yeah, it's a little
That
weird.
doesn't make any damn fucking sense.
I don't know. I guess I need to watch it again. But to me, it all looked very desaturated. Like none of it, like it's not like it looked that different, like black and white, not black and white. There might have been some slight inconsistencies, but I didn't see it. Like I didn't catch that. I just knew, okay, we're on the black and white planet, like on the planet that's devoid of colors, essentially. I didn't get that specific. Like that's desaturated versus that's pure black and white. I didn't catch that.
I think it looked pretty shockingly different, but I didn't have a problem with it. I just think it's a little odd.
Especially if we're treating this as one movie.
Yeah, no, I mean, I if that's the case, I don't disagree. Like, I think that's a good point that maybe more consistency would have been better there.
Ooh,
but I didn't even catch that.
I got an idea. How about this, Matt and Gil? What do you think about this?
Hey.
What if, to give it to clearly show what they were going for? You remember the numerous scenes that were on Gady Prime in the first one, like when the Bene Gesserit lady goes to see the Baron and on his little throne room area and so on and so forth, right? And the scene where he's in his little bathtub thing of oil or whatever.
Yeah.
So it looks normal. I mean, obviously the color palettes they go with are somewhat desaturated, looks very industrial kind of and stuff like that, which is all very appropriate for Harkonnen. But it doesn't look unworldly, right? What if the scene with the big gladiator fight, which is the very first time we see Gady Prime outside, what if instead of starting with Fade walking out into the arena, what if we had instead started with the Baron floating from inside where it looks like the way it did in the first movie, and then as he walks outside it transitions into this bright glaring infrared look, and then the rest of the scene is like that. That would tell you visually that everywhere outside on this planet it looks like this for reasons that we don't really need to get into. It's just
I see. Something about the outside like makes it just
because in the first movie and in the second movie we got numerous interior scenes that looked more like less like the rest of the movie, and Matt is saying that it's kind of jarring that this one scene looked totally different. I'm thinking that could have worked for me really well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm also kind of thinking about that scene in Thank You for Smoking, where
doing something for the gimmick just to do it for the gimmick.
Right. He's in the conversation with Rob Lowe, and like cigarettes in space, wouldn't that be sexy? Like, but wouldn't they blow up in an all oxygen environment? Probably, but it's a simple fix. It's just like we just invented the whatever device.
yeah. But overall, I guess like I guess like Matt, do you have anything else that you're gonna say as far as like issues that you had?
Yeah. If you're gonna have a battle scene, I don't care if it's past. I don't care if it took place 500 years ago. I don't care if it takes place 1,000 years in the future. I don't care if you have dragons. I don't. Just make the battle tactics make sense, because the battle tactics in the last push, uh, to actually take over the Harkonnen and everything, make no fucking sense. I mean, they had to have been complete fucking morons. I mean, you've got a domicile in place, and you're putting your soldiers outside of that domicile. Like, this is almost on par with the Game of Thrones episode where they're just like sending their cavalry out in the middle of the night to hit the White Walkers, and like, oh well, that's a cool shot where like all their flaming blades are going out and everything, and you know that the invading force managed to kill them all. But uh, I mean, tactically, I mean, like, it makes no fucking sense. I don't know why these people are doing these things.
I'm glad you brought it up. I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's a lot of stuff in this movie that they don't explain at all, and that's the battle tactic stuff is one of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I brought it up then.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will concur that it's one of those movies because I harp on this a lot. Is that I like movies with tactics in it.
Yep.
Right.
And this movie is a little messy. But I think it's because also there's not a huge focus on the fighting. It's more so about the stuff in between the fighting. I mean, the choreography, they put a lot of emphasis into like the hand, which, by the way, that's just one thing that bothers me about this whole universe. It's supposed to be like a very highly technological, like, universe. I mean, they have
Right.
like spaceships and everything. What the fuck are we doing with swords? Like, what
Would
are
you like to
swords
know?
doing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure, but I mean, like,
I don't even want to go into it. I just wanted you to know that there's very explicit reasons why all this stuff is explained. Any other version you watch will more or less at least give you a little bit of it, and this movie doesn't even try.
Yeah.
is it like an honor thing or like
Not at all.
So
It's
what is
all
it?
technological.
It's technological.
More or less,
They have guns.
yes, but and not that you see very much of it in
Yeah.
the story. I'll do like the 10-second version of it, the 20-second version of it. Thousands of years before this takes place, they invented shields. That changed everything because you can have shields on big giant ships, as you saw. You can have shields on individual people.
Oh yeah,
as you
they
saw.
show the shields. Yeah.
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 Shields in Dune are able to stop anything. Doesn't matter what it is. The only thing that sucks about shields is that if there's a slow, persistent thing trying to push through it, it fails. You know, like if you were to strike someone
like a
with a
knife.
blade, it just stops. You strike them with a bat, it just stops it. It bounces right off. Bullets bounce right off. Any projectile they've ever tested bounces right off. So they figured out though, if you just take your hand and push slowly and gently and persistently, it just slowly, there's a lot of resistance and then it just pops right through. So over thousands of years, they figured out that with swords, you can teach someone to fight in a way where you are slashing at them and then you do this delayed move and you can beat their shield. But you have to train to learn how to do that. And so in a sense, they have guns, they have pistols, they have all the rifles and things like that of really interesting technologies and stuff like that. But from a distance, if you're shooting people and they have a shield, it doesn't do anything to them, which is why over thousands of years, the ability to fight hand to hand became extremely important.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah, that's clever. It's a
yeah,
clever world building.
it'd be nice if any of that was in the movie. It's not.
Yeah, I will say
Yeah.
that's one thing. If it's not in the movie, because they do show the whole thing about the penetration of the shield
Yes.
with like a sharp object, but they didn't explain that that's the reason why
So-
guns are not used. Like they don't show how guns just bounce off of people left
Yeah,
and right.
exactly.
And
Now,
and
so
lives are
here's
going.
the next question, right? So you've got these harvesters out there in the desert. You obviously we see that there are shields that like can cover ships that are 10, 20 times the size of those things. If you've got these shields that are more or less perfect, unless something knows how to do this like delayed thing, so why don't they just try using shields? But in all the other versions, they explain this in dialogue that you can't use shields in the desert because they attract the worms. Like it just draws them straight to it, which is why for the rest of the movie, whenever the Fremen are out in the desert and they're fighting the Harkonnen or the Sardaukar or anything like that, you don't see anybody using shields. And that's why the hand-to-hand and the pistols and everything become much more useful. And the battle tactics all change because you can't use shields in the desert, the deep desert anyway. You can use them in the city, but you know. So there's this whole thing. And then the other thing is everyone's cautious about using shields because this movie depicts them using lasers way too much. Almost nobody uses lasers in Dune because if you happen to shoot, lasers were like ancient technology when this stuff came out. They were used for like in industrial purposes and stuff like that. But they found out on accident that if you shoot a shield, even a little tiny one, with a laser. It creates this like feedback loop, and there's like a nuclear explosion. So even though they have these powerful lasers, nobody really ever uses them because it's like suicidal.
Huh.
Wow, such a complicated universe.
That part I don't need them to explain. I don't think
Oh,
any of
yeah,
the
yeah.
movies covered that part. But the
Yeah.
first part is something that in the book, in the other two versions, there's a clear line of dialogue from when what's his name, when Liet is talking to them. It's very good exposition. It doesn't feel like exposition, and they're checking out the sand crawler, and somebody says like, "Hey, why don't we just use shields? This doesn't make any sense." And then you go, "Well, you can't do that. It's going to draw every worm within like 150,000 miles or something like that. It's like it draws them right to you." And they're like, "Oh shit! Well, that sucks," you know.
Yeah.
No, it probably could have been handled with Paul just like drawing a pistol at one point, and a Fremen like what the fuck are you doing? Pulling his hand down. What? I'm just shooting this guy who's threatening us. Like, no, don't you get what's going to happen if you pull that trigger?
It's just going to bounce off him.
Right. It could have
but
been handled in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, he would know that even more than them, though. But yeah,
Right.
it bothers me knowing all this, though, that in this movie, the tactics still don't make sense because
Right.
you hardly ever, except for in the scene where Paul takes the little gun from the guy, and in that first scene where he fights Jameis and everything, there's a little scene there where they got a little gun, and then there's a couple of other scenes where people are holding guns, but you never see them holding guns anywhere in this movie. Like, yeah, if you have shields, they're not very useful, but throughout most of this movie, people aren't wearing shields and nobody's carrying guns. It's very odd. Like in that scene where the Harkonnen attack and Duncan is leading like 1,000 men across that big tarmac. Number one, why are none of them armed with anything but like a knife? That doesn't make any sense. You got ships coming in, dropping bombs on you and stuff like that. And they're like, and he goes, "Let's go!" And they all like run out like with their. None of them have shields on. Where are your shields? Where are your guns? Where's everything? Like,
Also, like one of those things about tactics. It's just like air superiority doesn't become not a thing. I mean, it's not like you're. It's not like having your people bust out of the sand and attack people with melee weapons is suddenly going to work all that well if your opponents have like you know air superiority. It's like they've got people in the air that are going to just drop bombs on you.
yeah.
Well,
I mean, I would I know for a fact that I won't even get to half of this stuff because what we've covered on this list is like not even a third of it. But what I really wanted to say, and I know I'm not even going to get into any of this stuff, but I just wanted to say that my problem with this movie is not that they made changes or anything like that. Those are issues and it sucks and whatever. But the fact is that when you talk to people who love this movie and defend it, like religiously, because there's a lot of them online, their big defense is to say, well, when you adapt a book into a movie, you have to make changes. And I'm 100% with that. I completely agree. But the fact is that Denny's version of Dune, when you combine the two movies, is 5 hours and 25 minutes. The extended cut of the sci-fi miniseries is 4 hours and 55 minutes. So he had 30 more minutes than they did to tell the same story. And while the sci-fi miniseries has terrible special effects and cringy set design and pretty bad acting all around, even from the really good actors that are in it, like William Hurt and stuff like that. I mean, it's one of the worst performances he's ever given. And I mean, I love William Hurt. I'm not trying to diss him. I love him. It's a bad performance. But I mean, it is so difficult to get through that movie, and yet if you're able to just watch it for the story, they cover so much more of the story. They explain all the things that are not explained in Denny's version. They cover so many things that aren't even in the Lynch version. And if you watch the extended Spice Driver version of Lynch's Dune, which is about 3.5 hours, that one covers about the first half really well, but the ending gets a little sped up. But whatever.
It's 3.5 hours. I thought the David Lynch is like 2 hours or something.
The theatrical cut is 2 hours and 17 minutes. And that one does not really tell the story very well at all. But if you can watch the extended fan edit one, that one does a pretty good job, at least for the first 2/3 of the story. By the end, they have some stupid stuff in there, like these little like wrist mounted guns that they call weirding devices. It's like, it makes you want to vomit. It's so bad. But and they also made some really bad choices in that movie, but more or less Lynch's version is really pretty good in terms of like the feel and some of the acting. You know, Patrick Stewart and a lot of other people in it, really, really good choices. But there's some great stuff in Lynch's version. It's just not. There's some really bad choices too. But my point I'm trying to make is
premature technologically, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But all I'm trying to say is that forget about all of its flaws. If the sci-fi miniseries can get so much of the story told in 4 hours and 55 minutes, the whole like, we have to expand, we have to condense things for time, we have to make these changes, blah 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 blah. We have to take the inner monologue and turn it into the people say that Chani's character, like opposing Paul, is there to tell a story, like to tell the aspects of the story that are only covered in the text, like in their inner monologues and things like that. Just look at a different version. I mean, I get it that Lynch used inner monologues, which is really cringy, but look at the Sci-Fi Channel. Look at any other good movie that did like Lord of the Rings or Jurassic Park, movies that had people talking in their head, and then they didn't do that when they made the movie. There are ways you do it. You could tell a story without inner monologue and still tell that part of the story. There's good ways to adapt something and not just cut shit out and not change a character so that it's like an entirely different kind of character and betrays what that character really stood for and stuff like that. There's ways to do it. And Denny had 30 more minutes than the Sci-Fi miniseries did, and they had $35 million compared to whatever hundreds of millions of dollars he spent on these two movies. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't think that those excuses hold up. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, personally, what I'll ultimately say, and I don't think that can be denied. If I had to choose, let's say like my kids like read the book or something, and they want to like watch the movie, I'm not showing them anything but these two movies. Like I don't care about the inaccuracies or lacking in some of the detail and stuff. This is obviously by far the best, the closest thing to cinematically experience the book. Like the miniseries is for geeks. It's for the book geeks to like get all the details that they want to get. I get it that he had more time here, but he was not concerned with the details as much as he was concerned with the cinematic experience, which is flawed. I've already said, but ultimately, he does a really good job of just like taking you into this world, into this exotic world, and
telling
trying
the wrong story.
No, it's not. It's the same story. It's just that some of the details are different because he's focusing on different things. And I think that's perfectly fine. Like, you cannot compare this. The David Lynch version is not watchable. It's not watchable. It's just, it
Watch
looks
the
like,
other version. It's pretty.
it's like, it looks like my movies. It looks like somebody, like an amateur made them. Like basically someone didn't have enough money or the right resources.
Ouch.
Like, it's just like it just doesn't, like, you can't you can't make a movie with the wrong technology, like when the technology is not there yet. That's why, like, it was just premature.
It,
But it's
Gil,
just not.
I'll bring over the Spice Driver cut sometime, and we can try to watch it. I'm telling you, it is a
Again,
lot better.
as a story, yes, like it might be more accurate to the book and stuff, but and it'll have more details or get certain things right. But as a cinematic experience, this is by far better than any of those versions. It's not even close. Like
I think
the David Lynch version, I would probably give a 4, and the miniseries, I'll probably give it like a 5 or a 6. I would rate them lower than these movies. I don't care about the book. I don't give a shit about the book. I just care about the cinematic experience, and this one is by far the best version of it. Can there
what you
be a
just
better
said is
one?
exactly what Denis Villeneuve probably thought.
Yeah, well, he's like any adaptation, you're gonna have to make changes and choose what to focus and not focus on. And he has his way. If Spielberg would have done this, it would have been different. If Nolan would have done this, it would have been different. It would have been different no matter what. And some of them might have been closer to one you would like than not. But is it the best version of Dune that we have? It is. It just purely. I argue it's. I actually think it's also better than the book. I really dislike the book. I think the book. You know who did Dune the best? George Lucas. He fixed the book and he came up with Star Wars. Like he simplified the story. He made it about like like dark side versus like the light side. Like he made everything much simpler. He kept the dunes and the whole thing like in the story to some degree, but it was basically like there's a direct correlation between Lawrence of Arabia, like Dune, and Star Wars. Like it was like it's a Messiah story, but he simplified it as opposed to overcomplicated, and he made one of the greatest. He told one of the greatest stories ever told, which I think is a way better story than Dune. I give a lot of respect for Frank Herbert for creating this fantastical, exotic universe, and it's cool for the bookworms and people that really just want to dig deep into these details, much like maybe some people are like with the Lord of the Ring books. Um, but let's just another comparison. This has got nothing to the Lord of the Rings books. The Lord of the Rings books are so simple and yet complex. Like he could have taken a lesson from those books. Like how do you build a very, very complex world, but the story has to be simple. It has to be really simple. Like you should be able to tell it like literally in a paragraph, but then you can expand on it with like 3, 4 books because of the detail. Like but Herbert filled the pages with with plot instead of like details, and keep the plot thin. That's how you tell a good story. Keep the plot thin, but the details can fill up the rest. I don't know. That's just like my takeaway from it. Everybody's gonna have their opinions about which movies or books they like more than others, but it's fine. It's all still good stuff. It is one of the best science fiction or most well-known science fiction books. And yeah, maybe it's tough to adapt it because of its over complexity. And maybe that's why eventually it's never going to get its due, at least in your eyes. But to me, again, this is not Transformers. This is not Star Trek. This is Dune. Like this is like from listening to the audiobook, from watching all the other versions, this is a close approximation of what the intent was with the story that Herbert told. It does have the whole Messiah thing. It has the whole thing that it's like a cautionary tale. And it told it the best way that we've gotten this far. If somebody in 20, 30 years does a better version, then we'll judge it then. But until now, this is the best that we have.
Gil, I never thought that coming from someone who loves 2001: A Space Odyssey and Ex Machina and Moon, and really is always talking about wanting good, deep, heady science fiction, and has had many conversations with me in the past about how many of these people lump a bunch of space movies into science fiction, and they're not really science fiction, and how you just are longing for good stories that actually take, how did you put it that one time, that that the audience has to actually pay attention and participate and whatever. But instead, what we get is a bunch of garbage to make stuff accessible to the public. I never thought I'd hear you arguing that this movie is better because it's accessible and because it's simple and it's watered down, and this is how you should tell a good story, and it shouldn't be complicated, it shouldn't be hard to follow, it shouldn't take effort on the part of the audience member. I mean, it sounds to me like a reversal. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's not it at all. Like I didn't say to make it accessible or anything. This is not accessible stuff. This is not what JJ did to Star Trek. Hopefully Matt can back me up on that.
For people who
this
don't
is not
read a book.
No, I'm sorry. Like, this is not Star Trek. This is not like taking like a beloved like source material, and this is way closer to Lord of the Rings than like what Peter Jackson did to Lord of the Rings. Even though it's not there, it's not a home run like Lord of the Rings was. But it is better than The Hobbit. I haven't seen those movies, but from what I heard, this is somewhere squeezed between The Hobbits and The Lord of the Rings as far as like adaptations of beloved like books. But this is not. This is not Star Trek. This is not Transformers. This is not like putting it to the bro car obsessed like like machismo like action movie loving. This is not that. It's also not Ex Machina, and it's also not the moon, and it's also not 2001, and it's actually not even science fiction. This is fantasy, much like Star Wars is. It's not much science fiction. It's mostly a fantasy story.
That is the biggest fucking problem with the movies.